over to Bethany. See if it shows up here. Let's see.
So it shows on my end that we're live.
Okay.
Jerry?
Yep, we are.
All right.
We'll just wait here a couple minutes and get going.
All right.
All right, we're gonna wait about 30 seconds more and then we will get started.
All right. We're right on time today.
I know.
Usually for most of these I come to, it's a few minutes that we're always late, but this is good to actually start on time.
Yeah, we like to do that as much as we can. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? My name is Jerry Frank and I'm co-founder and CEO of STRATAFOLIO. And we are a web-based software solution that helps commercial real estate owners. And we really help in 4 specific areas. We help with financial management, operations management, lease management kind of activities, and finally investor management. And not only are we focused on efficiency and automation, but we're also focused on educating. And efficiency for many people comes in a lot of different forms. And part of that is being able to manage your cybersecurity, because if you have any kinds of issues, there could be some pretty profound impacts to you. So today we have with us Greg Edwards. Greg Edwards has been a technology entrepreneur since 1998. His last startup was an offsite backup and disaster recovery called Access Backup. And Access Backup was sold to a publicly traded company called J2 Global back in 2016. And in 2017, Greg started CryptoStopper, which is an anti-ransomware deception technology business. And Greg is now an expert in ransomware techniques and cybersecurity, and we are really happy to have him here to help us talk through what is cybersecurity and what are the impacts when you don't follow good password hygiene.
Thanks for having me, Jerry.
Yeah. All right, so our format for today is going to be 20 minutes of basic Q&A. So we'll just talk through some questions and answers. And then we're going to open that up to the public to see what other questions that they have. But why don't we start off with the question of what is cybersecurity? Let's define it.
Yeah, so cybersecurity is very broad, but the way that I define it is essentially stopping cyber attackers from harming your business. And that's a very blanket statement and means lots of things, but we have so many differing kinds of cyber attacks out there. And so really I define cybersecurity as stopping all of those attacks that could harm your business.
Yeah, so this shows up in the news a lot now. And I, as we said, this is a really broad topic, but we wanted to focus on one particular aspect, and that has to do with how this actually relates to passwords.
Yep. Well, and I think that what you have to do as a business owner or even as an individual is break it down to what's your risk and what are the most important things that you should do and start there. Because again, cybersecurity is so broad and can be very daunting. So take it one bite at a time and start with password management. I mean, there's several different areas that you could start with, but password management, if you haven't taken care of that, then start there.
Right. And early on, so Greg and I know each other, have known each other for quite a while. And several years ago, Greg had mentioned to us that we should purchase a password protection software, which we have and which we use, and we promote that to all of our customers because at some point in our lives, we were a abuser of using that same password across multiple accounts.
Yeah, well, and so I started, just to give you an example of my own personal journey through password management. It seems like 20 years ago, but probably 7-8 years ago, I started using a password manager. And I now have, I believe the last time I looked, I have 748 logins. So I mean, if you think about almost every single website that you visit, asks for a username and password to log in. There's no way that I could remember 700 different passwords. There's no way that people could, even if you only have 30, there's no way that you could remember 30 different passwords. And that's why people use the same password over and over. The problem with that is that all of this information, when a hack happens, whether that's with name the most recent one, Spotify was hit last year. So Spotify is hacked. That username and password combination then goes for sale on the dark web. And if you are one of those people, even if they didn't get that password from you directly, they now indirectly have that username and password combination. And it could be, if you use the same username and password everywhere, then it gets used across. So the only way to manage that effectively and I use 24 character randomly generated passwords. I couldn't even remember one of those, let alone 748.
Right.
So you've got to have a password manager to do that. And it takes time, but it actually becomes much easier once you start doing it. And you guys probably can attest to that.
Yeah, most definitely. Now it makes it really easy for companies that own real estate just like us, for managing your teams, giving your team members access to those passwords. It's easy to give them a group of access to passwords. They don't even actually have to see that password. So which gives you some protection if you ever do have to let somebody go. It becomes actually a very easy way to automate your business and protect your business.
Absolutely. And there are varying, I mean, depending on if it's just one person or if you need to share it across a team, there's platforms for all of that. And then the next evolution of the password management is what's called single sign-on. And that allows you to tie your cell phone to it, and for more advanced businesses, that gives a yet another layer to your password management.
Yeah. And you'd shared an interesting stat with me a couple of weeks ago about the number of people who are actually using the same password.
Yeah, it's still, it's scary. It's scary to me. And I was surprised to hear this. So adults over age 30, 81% of them use the same password over and over and for multiple things. So 81%, that to me is scary. Scarier thing is that people under 30 are actually worse. So 87% of people under 30 use the same passwords over and over. And all I have to say is stop it. Stop it.
Yeah, and it's so let's talk about kind of the worst case scenario. So, for a long time, I did use the same password. But what's the risk there then? What really happens if somebody gets your password?
Yep. So let's take one scenario. So I frequently will get called into incident response situations just to be an expert to help help in that response. And one that I recently had was an accounting firm that had remote access available to their employees to be able to connect, which almost everyone does now. And in this scenario, one of the users' passwords, they were using the same password for multiple things. And this attacker bought that password or cracked that password in one way or another, and was able to log directly in through their remote desktop to utilize that PC on the network within an accounting firm. And that sounds like a ridiculous situation, but there's a system that I use that tracks that remote desktop. So there's lots of different ways to connect into your system, but there are over 4 million open remote desktop sessions. And that's a Microsoft product that should never be open like that. There's over 4 million of them open today. So wow. In this particular scenario, the attackers logged in as the user, they're on the network, ended up causing $120,000 of direct damage to this very small accounting firm. And they took all of the data from that accounting firm and exfiltrated it to Chile through what they call command and control center servers. And then because it's an accounting firm, they actually then started filing tax returns on the accountant's clients. And this went on for a little over 10 months before it was discovered. And the way that it was discovered was when the tax returns started coming in. These attackers actually made over $40,000 from this one very small accountant in fraudulent returns. And that's ultimately how it was detected and caught, was through those fraudulent returns. Otherwise, they would have never even known that they were hacked. And again, I mean, that sounds crazy also, but the average time to detection of a data breach is 9 months. So that's, these people get in and you don't know it. It's not like it used to be where malware, I mean, we think about malware from years ago, would cause your computer to run slowly, or, you know, lots of different things. But that's not the case anymore. When you have an attacker on your system, or you have malware on your system, you likely won't even know it. And that's the intent now, is that they're just behind the scenes collecting information. And so to relate it to likely a lot of the people that are on this and listening to this event, if you think about the accounts that you have and all of the client information that you may have on your systems, and all of the varied ways that attackers could interact with those, and you think about that happening for 9 months before you would even know it, that's worst case scenario. And it could be all kinds of different scenarios where they try to extract money from your clients, they try to extract money directly from you. So lots of different, very ugly scenarios.
Yeah. So they're getting in, and then they're just waiting for an opportunity to pounce. And it could be lots of different ways.
Well, and actually, so these cyber attackers have become very specialized. And so there's what's called the dark web, that actually is the majority of the web that's out there and available that most people never see. But there is everything for sale. I mean, everything from guns and drugs to user account information to identity. You know, you can buy a driver's license from any state in the US for $100 and have it shipped directly to your door. So with that being available, what these attackers do, there's ones that specialize in just compromising Facebook, and they just sell, all they do is do the initial compromise, and then they sell those Facebook credentials. So think about that, you know, just that one scenario, and then take it across every single social platform, every bank, every credit card, anything that there's a login to, it's for sale on the dark web. Wow.
And are they, so let's just say they get my password, and then I've disclosed something else that they've seen on email, or wherever else that they've gotten into. Are they collecting this information about me?
Oh, well, so yes, but
Like
not,
putting it all
yeah,
together in the Jerry profile.
right. So there's aggregators that they just will take database, and it's not typically, I mean, this is much more automated than you would ever realize, and much more sophisticated than people even think about. So it's not like there's some hacker sitting in their mom's basement like we think of in the hoodie, that's looking at Jerry's information and collecting your information. It is very like you think about Stratafolio and the power that Stratafolio has and what you guys do with the information
Yep.
that you collect and utilize. Well, the exact same kind of things are happening with these cyber attackers, and they're using automated systems and even utilizing AI to then go find all the information on Jerry.
Well, excellent. That makes me sleep so much better.
Aren't you glad you started using a password manager?
Oh, I am very glad. So what about, so now that somebody is in your company, so what if somebody would get into your company and now there's the potential for ransomware, right? Or a ransomware attack?
Yep. So yeah, so ransomware is right now is the second most common and frequent kind of cybercrime that can happen against your business. First most common is business email compromise, where they steal your email account information and utilize it for some nefarious reason. But what ransomware is they encrypt all of the data files. So you think about all of the files that you use every day to run your business. If they were completely encrypted and you couldn't access them anymore, what kind of damage would that do to you? And what they do, I mean, those files still are sitting on your system, but you can't access them unless you have the password to get into them. And these ransomware attackers are happy to sell you that password. That is all ransomware is, just encrypting the files and then demanding a ransom, always in the form of cryptocurrency, to get the password to those files. And I started seeing this. So I previously owned an offsite backup and disaster recovery company and started seeing these ransomware attacks happening starting back in 2012. The very first ransomware attack that I dealt with and saw, the ransom demand was $40. And just to put that into perspective, Garmin this past year paid a $10 million ransom for essentially exactly the same kind of scenario. And the smallest that I've seen in recent years was 60,000. So, I mean, these demands are typically in the hundreds of thousands. And you might think, as a small business, that you're not, why would somebody be coming after you? Well, because that information is important to you. And you might say, okay, we're just going to start over. We're going to recover from backup. And that's fine. And hopefully you do have a good backup. But one other thing that these ransomware attackers are doing are also sabotaging the backups. So not only do they encrypt your data, but then they delete all of your backups. Yeah. So making sure you have offsite and encrypted backups is absolutely critical. But then that also can take days to recover from. So do you want to, you want to have to deal with that?
Right. Well, and from any organization's perspective, it's just embarrassing to admit that this happened to you. So, and you feel vulnerable because of that.
Absolutely. Well, in the case of the accounting firm that I gave, I mean, it was a small accounting firm, 10 employees or so. And that owner of that accounting firm to have to then go and tell his clients, we were compromised because we didn't properly take care of our systems.
Right.
That, I mean, this is a very experienced accountant. He was almost in tears.
Oh, I
because
bet.
of this, because it's very emotional to have that. It's very invasive, and it's like someone broke into your house.
Right. Yeah. We're starting to get a few questions from the audience. Somebody wrote in and said, for my real estate company, they use Stratafolio, excellent, but they also use some legacy spreadsheets that are stored on their computers. Are those types of docs really targets for hackers?
Well, so in two ways, yes. So one, ransomware. So just taking and encrypting them, and then so you don't have access to them. And then secondarily would be just exfiltrating and stealing those. And then what information is in them that they could use for something else. Because again, you think of the aggregators and what information is in there that they can pull out and then sell in some way on the dark web.
Yeah. So how can I be sure that my passwords have not already been compromised?
So I would say, so there is a maintained list of that hackers use that are, there's a 10,000 most common passwords used. If you're using any password that is spring 2021 with a capital S or some variant of that, it's compromised. There are sites out there, and you can actually just type in compromised password, do a Google search on it, and find lots of solutions. The password manager that I currently use is a system called 1Password, and I may have, and LastPass is another that I recommend. I believe LastPass also has it, but 1Password has a system that they call Watchtower, where it will take and check all of your passwords to see if they've been compromised and just tell you. But if you're using any passwords that are less than 12 characters and fairly common combinations that you think someone else, like that 10,000 other passwords might be similar to this, it's compromised.
So if I just say, okay, all of my spring 2021 passwords, I'm going to change them, and I'm going to go to a 24 character, combination.
Yep.
I have now stopped that person from coming in, correct?
Correct. So the thing though that you should do, and people should do this anyway, would be to monitor your identity. That's the, so if you think that you've used bad passwords, or you think that you know that a site that you use has been compromised because you saw it in the news, then change the passwords. I mean, that's the very first thing.
Right.
And then second thing is to monitor your identity. So monitoring your credit score, monitoring your bank and credit card accounts, and just making sure that there's not fraudulent transactions already happening.
And how as an organization, how would you, as a company, how would you recommend monitoring both of those things?
Yeah, so there are actually dark web monitoring solutions so that would be the very best way to sign up. There are if you just do again a Google search on dark web monitoring, there are companies that specialize in monitoring the dark web and monitoring all of these databases specifically for your information. So that's a great way to do it. And then as a company, I mean, monitoring, again, same things you would as an individual, your bank accounts, your credit cards, making sure that those aren't compromised. And then asking your IT guy. There are some very specialized tools, and the typical IT person may not be advanced enough to know what these are, but they are what are called EDR tools. So it's endpoint detection and response. And they're essentially like a surveillance recording system for your computer system, and it will track. So we use one called Carbon Black, and it will track everything that happens, every connection in and out, every file that's open, and it'll basically do that investigative determination to figure out if your systems have already been compromised. And go ahead.
Yeah, so in that case, I would know, for instance, if somebody from Chile was logging in to look at my system.
Yep, that's exactly how we made that determination with the accounting firm, was using that EDR system and seeing, I mean, we found they actually, again, very specialized in these attackers, very specialized in compromising accounting firms. I guarantee you that there's cyber attackers out there that specialize in real estate companies. and that they know what systems you're using. And in this case, they knew what kind of accounting system was being used, and they exfiltrated that data. And so we were able to see that data, see those files, see the transfers going to Chile. And those are just the kinds of systems that people, I mean, you think, oh, Microsoft is taking care of that for us, right? No, they're not. They're very specialized systems to be able to do that kind of tracking and investigative determining.
You know, it's, as we've talked through this, it's really surprising to me about the career path and trajectory that there is for these people in this industry and how creative they get. We've had situations within Stratafolio where somebody was just trying to get information, like they would send an email from that looked like it was from me to somebody else. Nobody opened it, but we could tell because we've trained everyone to look for who is on that extension, and it should say at Stratafolio. But they get really creative in trying to figure out information about people.
Absolutely. And what they're trying, I mean, a lot of times they might be as simple as asking for a phone number, right? So what they're trying to do is match up that username, password with then the phone number that's associated with it. And now you can spoof that phone number and do, lots of different things, call the bank, say you're Jerry, or whatever. And then also can spoof that number to attack your two-factor authentication to then potentially log into your bank, log into all different kinds of systems.
Right. All right. So your top tips for everyone today is change your passwords.
Well, get a password manager. I mean, that there's no way that people can remember the number of passwords that they have. So get a password manager and use the two that I recommend still are 1Password and LastPass. There are lots of other solutions out there. And again, if you just Google password manager and look at the top password managers for 2021. And depending on the size of your business, if this is a larger business and you're going to want a more sophisticated solution that they can share, which we don't recommend, don't share passwords unless you're going to do it through a system that's designed to do that, where you can take that access back.
Which I totally recommend. It's so easy to manage passwords that way. It probably actually saves time, because in the past I used to forget passwords, and then you'd write it down, you'd have to reset. Having LastPass really saves time and energy.
Absolutely. So if I could give one additional tip, it would be to update your systems. So when you get those notifications from Microsoft or from Apple that say you need to update, do it. That's the second, probably the second biggest thing that people should do is patch management.
Okay. One last question before we close up. You mentioned cyber insurance. So what does that include, and how much cyber insurance should you take out?
Yeah. So for a business, the very minimum that I would start with would be 100,000, because you're going to have, if you have an incident, you're going to have $50,000 just in lawyers and forensic investigation before anything is done. That's just to start with. Then if there is actually compromised information, a good way to look at it is each record that you have in your system. So if it's a real estate firm and you have 1,000 contacts, which probably would be light in a real estate firm, each one of those, the cost associated with a data breach is right around $200. It's $217 on average last year. So that's over $200,000 that an event may cost you. And the more information you have, then the more that could cost. So with cyber liability insurance, you definitely want to read the policy, which I know is very boring, but see what's included and what's not included. And what you want to make sure is that you have as blanket of coverage as you possibly can, so that your liability limits aren't where you have a, you have a $500,000 policy, but you have a ransomware limit of 25,000.
Right.
So you want to make sure that those limits all match up to the amount that you think you need. And again, I would start even the smallest of small businesses at 100,000, and then depending on the size of the business into the millions.
So will your cyber liability insurance cover the ransomware?
It will. Yeah, it'll actually cover the ransom payment. So we have an employee that actually was terminated from a city that they paid a $460,000 ransom that their insurance paid. And they actually have what are called breach coaches at these insurance companies that will come in and help with a breach. And if it's a ransomware event or a data breach or email compromise or whatever, they have specialized breach coaches for each of those. And again, depending on the company, but you want to look at the limits. So one thing that's happening and very common now is limiting those ransomware payment amounts and limiting them too low. I mean, 25,000 is way too low for that. And I mean, this is a double-edged sword where having the insurance is just then further propagating the ransomware attacks because they're paying higher and higher ransoms, which makes it more profitable. And it's ugly.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Greg. Do you have any final things that you want to share with anybody?
So if people are worried about ransomware, this is shameless plug for CryptoStopper. But if anyone's concerned about ransomware, definitely reach out to us. We only sell through IT providers and through resellers. So we'd be happy to find one in your area that could resell CryptoStopper to you. And really what CryptoStopper is it essentially stops any ransomware attack that starts running on your system. So beyond the typical antivirus, which 77% of companies that are hit by ransomware had up-to-date antivirus, we actually watch for that ransomware activity once it starts running and kill it in less than a second.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that information about CryptoStopper. And if anyone has additional topics for the future, let us know. We have an exciting one coming up in April that we'll be talking about CAM reconciliation. Thanks again, Greg, for being here, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me, Jerry.
Take care.